Hey guys, you're tuned in to the Wealth Project. Basically today we're going to be talking about some stocks related to the chip shortages and the new ARM architecture revolution that's been happening, specifically the Apple M1 chip. And we'll also be following up to the knock-on effects involving TSMC and AMD. So I heard you guys have done a little bit of research on the Apple M1.
Yeah.
What have we found out?
Yeah, it looks pretty good, to be fair. Obviously, the sort of gist of it I get is essentially, in the simplest terms, all the different parts of the computer were different, and of the processor, like the GPU, CPU, etc. And what they've done is just put it all into one chip.
Yep.
Which saves obviously space, heat, probably for one. Obviously, it's quicker because it has copy memory from the GPU to the CPU and things like that. So that's generally what I've got of it. It's 3.5 times faster. CPU, GPU 6.5 times faster. So really, all the Apple products just going to be faster, better processing. It's not a huge, like, I must admit, I don't think it's a huge user change. You'll notice it in the iMac, which obviously was like historic the way that was built. But the rest of it, really, if you're a user, you won't know. But then again, it's like a lot of Apple products. They haven't evolved hugely over the past few years. They just sort of say, "Oh, it's quicker," or it's got another camera to the 5 on the back, and then they sell it for another £1,000. So, yeah.
I can get over the size of the M1 chip, which is 5 nanometers, which if you've looked at previous years, how big they used to be and how much smaller it is. And obviously with the stats saying like 2 times faster than the latest PC computer. I'd love to see, like, George, do you reckon this is the one to get?
If I were to get a laptop or a computer right now, I don't know why you would want anything else. Like, because it actually does not make any sense. It does in some edge scenarios, or let's say you're a Windows user, but for the most part, if you're looking between the two, the price to performance difference is just not fair.
But say if you're into gaming, or if you're actually into your computers, you'd never look at it, because obviously with everything being built into that one chip, you can't replace the GPU to upgrade it. You can't, obviously previously you used to be able to upgrade different parts. Obviously the RAM is 16 gig.
The RAM's built in, isn't it?
Yeah, that's also built into the chip.
Also means you can't change it. But 16 gig of RAM is fine, obviously for most users. But if you are a gamer or someone, usually the people that buy these really high performance laptops, like the gaming ones, are because they're for gaming. Obviously the Apple ones mainly targeted at obviously businessmen and people who just got a bit of money who obviously want the Apple logo.
An interesting thing is that the enthusiast gaming PC market is one of the smallest markets that, let's say, AMD or Intel would serve. They obviously do still make a lot of profit from their graphics cards because they sell them at a high margin. But like, being a gamer myself, like, I do have a self-built computer. Of course, we've got one behind as well. And I love that. But as, let's say, you're a standard consumer, you don't really game, you kind of, I don't know, just a basic user, I guess. I don't know why you would get anything else.
The battery life.
It's 20 hours.
It's huge, 17 hours web browsing. I think that's what everyone will be looking for.
It'd be interesting to see what the actual battery life is, because the amount of times you look at something and it goes, because when I was having a look at a new laptop, I was looking at, I think it was, I looked at quite a few, but I think there was a HP, I can't remember what it was, but it looked really cool. The specs were good and things like that, and I watched a review and they basically timed the battery life, and it lasted like 5.5 hours, and its claim was 12 hours.
Yeah.
And it was just like, that's just ridiculous for it's same with everything. You look at cars and they go, oh yeah, it does this miles per gallon, and it does like half of that.
Yeah.
So you always get sort of the wild manufacturer claims, but I think really it will just no one particularly needs this upgrade of chip at all. Like there's no need for it. You could quite happily buy the old MacBook and you go, oh, this is great, this is really quick. That tiny sort of split second difference you won't know, but obviously for Apple and in terms of stocks, it just means their technology's up there. Obviously, good reputation for innovating and things like that, and they've just got a new product to sell. Because obviously they've put it in a range of their devices, haven't they? So that obviously they haven't just stuck to the iMac. But I imagine it will go throughout their whole product range, to be honest.
Exactly. They have the same chip that's in the iMac in the iPad.
Yeah.
So effectively, that iPad can do everything that a big Mac can do, and that's something.
They're big Macs as well.
Yeah, and that's something that Intel and AMD still cannot say. Like if you look at those, the Surface Pro X or just the regular Surface computers, they use quite underpowered chips in comparison. What you can do with those things, and I guess the cooling that they have on them, they can't do anything close to what these chips can do. So
that's it. I mean, I've got the Windows Surface, and it's got an i5 processor in. So I didn't even go for the i7 because that was like £1,000.
Yeah.
But yeah, just the i5 is like fine for me, to be honest. Literally use it for video calls, surfing, Excel.
Yeah.
And that's generally the extent of my usage.
Yeah, I think most chips, for example, in the Surface or any late or recent Intel chip, AMD chip, in real world usage, they're going to be just fine. But the reason why this is so good is because this type of performance and this type of efficiency will kind of knock onto server. So this is going to be really interesting for like big enterprise markets that really need that power efficiency, I think. Whereas for an average consumer, they're going to be like, I don't give a shit. Like, this is all fine.
It'd be interesting with their earnings come out, and obviously their sales and how much these new computers sell for and how it reacts. Because it's sitting, I was just having a look at $122, and I think this year it's reached 143. So it is looking to break this year's highs.
Didn't surprise me. I think with people working from home and things like that, people are gearing up. They're buying laptops a lot more. They're buying, obviously, if you were to look at an iMac, for example, that's got a big screen. That's great, so I can split then the window over two. So I think that just laptops in general will be more popular this year, which I think will sort of inflate the results a bit. But Apple always do well, regardless of what they launch, to be honest.
Yeah, that's it. When you're looking at a trading play, and the thing is with Apple, it's not just in the computers they're in. So it is a good trade to have rather than just a company that's specifically just in this sort of technology. Which is why, out of all of it, I would have gone for Apple personally as a trade, which we haven't yet, but whether we do that in the future.
Yeah, well, there's just no returns in Apple. Well, it's a blue chip stock, so you're talking like 2% gains basically. So it's just there's never a lot in Apple, even with this brand new product range. If they bring a brand new iPhone, anything like that, it goes up like 2-3%.
Yeah,
it's nothing really. So
$2 trillion market cap.
Yeah, that's it. So the chip itself, then obviously, it's made by the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, whose ticker is TSM.
Yep.
And they account for 84% of all chips, basically. So they pretty much control the chip market.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, as you touched on before, there's been rumors of chip shortages, and there's also been a bit of negative press about China and things like that, which Taiwan have been involved in.
Mm-hmm.
So like Trump came out and claimed before that the chip sold by TSM was in Chinese missiles, which wasn't a great look. And they also used to trade with a company called Physius or Fitium even. And they recently got put on America's entity list, which basically means you're banned from trading with this company. So I think soon enough they're going to have to sort of take a pick between the Chinese and the American market.
Mm.
I think America, to be honest, takes up I think it's about 60% of sales. So yeah, I think they'll go for America and they'll make a real push there.
Mm.
But yeah, it's been interesting sort of reading about them and the different contracts they're involved in and things like that, because no one's quite sure just how widely all their chips are used. Like imagine the chip in your iPhone or iMac also being used in a missile is pretty extraordinary.
New definition of powerful.
Yeah, that's it. So the stock itself obviously has been down 6% the past month, which is pretty much because of this news about the chip shortages and negative press and things like that. So
Yeah,
they're a huge company, sort of 45.6 billion in sales in 2020. So like they're just a huge company. So
they are
the
the market
M1 chip,
leader.
yeah. So the M1 chip for someone else, if they came out and said, "Oh yeah, we're producing it, Apple's using it," it would spike hugely. But them didn't make a huge amount of difference just because the sheer size of them already. It's
Yeah,
similar to what we were saying just with Apple, where they're already massive already. A new product or a new bit of good news doesn't impact them as much as other smaller companies.
At the same time, it's still a fairly safe bet. Obviously, when we get in, just because we're in such a bearish market at the moment.
yeah, you don't know where the floor is.
So hard, yeah, exactly. But to put it in even now, just with the computers they've got out now and with sales, I think it's a fairly safe bet. I think you probably could get in at a better price if you waited, as we're still seeing the market conditions hurt a lot of people, investors. So yeah, so I think it's more when if you were to trade it. But again, like Sam was saying, you're not going to be looking like one of these penny stocks with 100% gainer overnight. It's very, very steady, but it's pretty safe.
Yeah, it's definitely a growing industry,
Yeah.
obviously as well. Like
They're getting into cars now as well, with all the
yeah,
tech and so on. So it's you've got to take that into account. And
And there's huge stimulus as well coming out. There was news from the Biden administration that they're going to introduce. I think it was they asked for 40 billion. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
37 is what I've got written down. So round
30,
up.
Yeah, so around 37 billion dollars to start start making semiconductors in the US, or to expand that kind of manufacturing capability. I think what's interesting though is the reason why TSMC is so powerful and so influential right now is because they pulled in all the customers like AMD, like Apple, and basically they even pulled in Intel, and they're just making semiconductors for everybody, and that was their business. But because of the scale, they could really get down to like 5 nanometers, 4 nanometers. They could do it quite quickly because of the amount of money they had. Whereas Intel has been trying to get down to 10 for the last 5 years, and they've been stuck on 14. They can't go any lower. So that's why AMD has been killing them. That's why Apple is killing them, because they're using TSMC. So I don't know where this money would go. Would it go to Intel?
Well, to be fair, TSM are there's basically, I can't remember if it's rumors or whether it's confirmed that they're going to basically construct an American production facility so that they can start obviously making chips in America, because as part of Biden's thing, he wanted them made in America. So yeah, the likelihood is I think there was a couple of companies which had pledged to build factories basically to produce semiconductors. And yeah, that's the way I think it will go, to be honest. But equally, I was just thinking about that Intel thing, but I just don't think when you're talking about that, it's kind of just like a marketing ploy, because really, like, if I was to buy a laptop, I don't care about the 7 nano whatever it is. Right? The laptop's like that and like that, unless I want like a laptop which is as thin as a paper, which I don't know why you ever would. Like, having a thin laptop's great, but obviously when you get that thin, it would just break anyway.
Yeah, but the thing is that won't change much. Like these decisions get made up the chain by, these executives or people that are engineers in these companies. They're going to look and go, what's our competition? How are we going to get reviewed with this product? And they'll put it up against Apple's, for example, and go, okay, we can't compete. So then they'll find alternatives, or they'll find another way to compete on performance. Even though it doesn't quite make a real world difference, I think they're still going to have a bit of a competition between each other.
The main thing from Apple's point of view is just the architecture of combining, obviously, the CPU, GPU, things like that. Because I'm not sure sort of the breakdown of the Intel I processors, but I don't know if they use a similar sort of thing or whether they've been able to do that yet or not. But obviously, when you've got an M1 chip which can obviously reduce the size by that much, when you've got all those different components, and thing is, if you can just buy in a chip, like we saw it before when Samsung had the OLED displays, and Apple was having to buy their OLED displays from Samsung for a ridiculous price. And it's just like, it's easier for Intel probably to buy the M1 chips, but they won't do it because they've got the i9 processors and probably i10 or i11 by now. But to most users, it won't make a great deal of difference, but to Apple users, especially on the stuff which uses the old processors such as the iMac, I think it'll make a huge difference.
I'm pretty convinced. My not my iMac, but my MacBook
You're an
Pro,
Apple lover, aren't you?
I've got Apple everything, and I'm looking at my laptop right now, and it's
Such a white boy.
2007, 2008 old school one. It works fine, but obviously with this now, I'm pretty convinced that I'm gonna get one.
Have you got that silly little bar thing which goes along the front?
No.
I saw that and thought it was the most pointless thing. Brought out a new MacBook for that.
And I don't get along with it. But I've been sort of waiting for it to, because obviously every year they always say this is the next one, this is the next best thing, and it keeps upgrading. But I do think this year they've really listened to the people.
The marketing's hit home.
Yeah, they've done the marketing. The presentation was perfect.
Yeah,
and
I would.
And I'm convinced that I'm gonna buy one.
I would say you're gonna hate me for this, but wait a little bit more.
Another year.
No, not that long. Okay. I reckon end of this year, touch bar's going away, more ports. So you actually get a HDMI and a USB.
Yeah.
Some nice things there. And they'll redesign them as well. So
I think
maybe
a little bit
it'll be all USB-C and things like that.
No, they're actually going back on their decision. They're not going to have all USB-C anymore.
Okay.
They're going to have an SD card reader and a HDMI and the MagSafe.
That's odd. Well, the thing is, though, are you saying you think they'll bring out another one?
There's going to be the rumor is there's going to be in maybe a month or so, a 14 and a 16-inch MacBook Pro coming out.
What are they? They're usually 13.3, are they?
Yeah, so they're going to use the body of the 13 and fit a 14-inch screen in it. And then same with the 15.
They have a 15. Yeah.
It's a 15 in size, but it's a 16 screen, something like that. But both should be a redesign, like a full redesign. So might be one to wait for.
All right, I'll listen to you, George.
Yeah. So that it would probably be about $2.5 grand, but it'd be fine.
5, maybe 7 grand.
Yeah, that'd be it.
Maybe you can buy an extra mouse with it for like another 10K.
Yeah. To be honest, I had a look at getting a MacBook, and I was like, well, I don't want a 13-inch screen because it's just too small. So I'll have a look at a 15-inch screen.
It's huge.
But at the time I priced it, having been through it, it was like 1,500 quid, and I was like, well, that's not happening.
Yeah.
No, I think 14 inches it's a good size. That
Yeah.
I think unless you're like a heavy gamer or in a certain industry where it requires like your computer, I think for the general people, I think a lot of people, as long as people say it's slightly faster and the battery life's better, it's like the new phones that come out. There's not a huge amount of difference, but it's just those little minute things that people get. So
Yeah, as a gamer, I don't know why you'd buy an Apple computer, but it's just, it doesn't make any sense. You wouldn't do it.
But if you're a techie, you wouldn't ever buy an Apple computer, an Apple product. So many people I know like buy the obviously they buy the Samsungs for the phones because technically they're better. I mean, personally, I have an iPhone. I much prefer the iOS operating system. But it's just, yeah, I think if you're into it, you go, well, that makes no sense. I'm having to pay like you could build it a lot cheaper. And it's same, you've seen it across everything from like, even you look at actual gaming and you could buy a PlayStation for like 500 quid or 700 quid or what they are now.
If you can find one.
Yeah, that's it.
They're all gone.
That's it.
Thanks to
Or
your
you could
7C.
buy. That's it. Or you could just buy a PC, which is 4 times as quick for like the same price. And yeah, it's just every now and again, it's sort of, obviously you pay for the brand name. So the same with PlayStation and Apple, they both have the same thing, but you look at the equivalent gaming PCs and things like that, and they just trump it. But I mean, I'd never build a gaming PC, and I just wouldn't do it. I'd never build a normal PC because, one, I just don't need it, and two, I'd rather just buy it and not have to fiddle with it. If it breaks, I wouldn't have a clue what to do with it. So, but yeah, you buy it, Morgan, don't worry.
I will buy
it. I'll probably buy it and then I'll go, oh, that looks really good, to be fair.
We'll do another video of Morgan's reveal.
Yeah.
You can do an unboxing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. That always gets a views, the unboxing videos.
Yeah. See, I am a tech guy. I have a computer that I built. I have a Windows laptop and I have a Mac laptop. But I love Mac as like a laptop. Like a laptop OS. It is perfect. As a desktop OS, like I'm a bit iffy about it, but when you're out and about, like that trackpad, the battery life, the screen, everything together, and the fact that it's not like just offensively ugly like Windows, it's just, it's so nice. Whereas when I'm on a desktop, I don't really mind. I'll use something like it's fine. It's just for like hard work.
When you work, Jordan?
Actually, I don't use Windows at all for my work. I use macOS or Linux, but I use a Unix-based OS because everything at my work requires Unix. If I were to use Windows, I'd have to like use virtual machines or some kind of extra software that's not going to be natural to the system. So yeah. If you work with Linux, it's just
no one works with Linux.
Yeah, just
you're the only person I know who's ever used it.
No, I mean like from a server. If I want to log into a server that we're using at work, that obviously like a lot of servers use Linux, and that I would have to use some kind of proper terminal client. I think Windows does like do the things that I would probably need to do, but I just don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's it. Well, just obviously I've got this Surface Pro, but if I had I'd probably prefer to get an iPad, but for doing like work tasks, I'd much
It's a
rather do
bit
it on
harder.
this
Yeah.
than mainly just because it's got Word, it's got Excel and things like that. I just find it easier to use. I can attach the keyboard and things like that. Mind you, I guess you can do that on iPad Pros now, can't you?
I guess you can. But I mean,
But
yeah,
they're like £1,000 and then another 400 quid for the keyboard. So
yeah. I mean, same for the Surface though, right? It's like 200 for the keyboard. I don't know
Well,
why
to be
they're
fair,
doing that.
I think mine was like 700 or 750 with a keyboard.
Yeah, that's not bad.
It just depends, obviously, what process you want, things like that. But really, like just for general stuff, you just don't need that much. I think this got like 8 gig of RAM, and that's like more than enough for me, really. Like it's never been slow, but the one thing I always think about Mac OS is they never seem to slow down. So like even you use it like 5 years later, and it's still pretty quick.
I think
But
that's like
I
a
use
Unix
Windows.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
But
because Mac OS is like based on not really Linux, but it's based kind of on Linux.
yeah.
And they both have that characteristic
Yeah.
where they don't really slow down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So basically, in summary, we're saying it's
Wait
a great buy. Yeah.
So wait till the summer.
Yeah.
For your MacBooks, they're going to
Don't
sell a
invest in
lot of
Apple
them
because there's rubbish returns.
Yeah.
AMD, don't invest because you get rubbish returns as well.
Yeah, I mean they're quite overvalued. AMD, I would say.
Yeah. AMD, or do you mean?
Yeah,
TSM?
AMD. So
AMD.
TSM has gone down quite a lot recently.
Yeah.
Well, they peaked at like 140, I think, and now they're at 107, I think.
I don't know. I only did it in percentages. When I originally looked, it was about 6%, but I imagine they're about, on the latest market, I imagine they're around 10% down.
Yeah, so in the last month, they're down 10%.
Yeah.
Down 22% over the last 3 months.
Yeah.
So
that's TSM, yeah?
TSM. And what's weird to me about that is that we're in a chip shortage. Their demand is going to be higher than ever. All the eyes are going to be on them, and yet their stock is dropping.
Yeah. And what's more weird is the fact that the biggest company in the world announced them as basically we're going to be buying all our chips from here, and their stock's still going down.
Yeah. What's going on? And they're AMD's only chip maker as well. So AMD is their second biggest customer, maybe NVIDIA as well. So all the big tech companies are getting stuff from them. And people are like, no, you know what? We don't want to invest in that.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Do you want to expand a bit more on what AMD is and sort of who they are?
Yeah, sure. So AMD, well, I guess their main competitor is Intel. You probably know Intel a bit better from pretty much every laptop ever sold in the last like 10 years. So AMD have been a competitor of Intel's, basically making the same kind of chips, just CPUs and GPUs for laptops and for desktop computers. So they're quite an old company. I think they've been like since the 80s or something, quite early. And over time, they've had like quite some controversy with their competition with Intel. Like there was some sort of anti-competitive behavior that was happening in the early 2000s between Intel and AMD. Basically, Intel were paying off PC manufacturers to not use the faster AMD chips and to just use their Intel chips anyway, which kind of killed them a little bit. Yeah. So there's been this kind of hate for Intel ever since. I don't know. They've been like the big, powerful juggernaut. But after that, they kind of lost a bit of rep with the enthusiasts.
Yeah.
And AMD came back recently, I think maybe 3 or 4 years ago, with a completely redesigned chip after kind of failing for a long time. Yeah. And that's called Zen.
Yeah. So what I wrote down is obviously they've got this acquisition, haven't they, from they're basically going through a merger with Zinx.
Zinx.
Yeah, it's X. How do I write it down?
Oh, XY.
Xilinx. XILINX.
XILINX.
Yeah. So $35 billion acquisition.
Whoa. Yeah,
So
well, I mean,
and it's sort of gone under the radar, to be honest. Like you haven't seen huge fluctuations in their share price for the size
they
of the
trading at now?
acquisition as well.
sorry,
Oh, yeah,
Morgan?
I haven't got the figures in front of me. I can have a look.
Yeah, I mean, right now, AMD's primary business is CPUs and GPUs, and they're also making stuff for servers. So you've got Amazon, who's buying a lot of chips from them. A lot of laptop and like PC manufacturers are giving AMD options now. So instead of just even the Surface laptops, they have Intel edition and AMD edition. And what's funny is all the AMD chips are much faster than the Intel ones now. So we've reached a point where Intel is actually the low performer of the group, because they've kind of been stagnating for the past maybe 5 years. So it's interesting to see maybe AMD will surpass Intel and take some more of that market cap from them. But also it might not be. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
You have to have a look as well, like with schools and whatever, and who they're contracted with computers as well, because that's another huge thing. I'm sure it is Intel, and obviously every, I don't know how many it is, 4 to 5 years probably, they all upgrade. So I'm not sure who has the biggest contract in that aspect, but that's another one to look at.
I imagine Intel.
Intel would definitely have the loyalty and the customer base and everything. AMD is very much the competitor.
Cheaper.
Yeah.
And Intel's range is obviously a lot more extensive than Apple's. So, and like schools don't want to have to, I mean, unless you're a private school, you don't have to be spending like 1,500 quid per laptop. Yeah.
They've only got a certain amount of funding.
Yeah, precisely. Like you could buy a Lenovo laptop for like 500 quid. So you could get 3 of those for the cost of one MacBook. Yeah. With I'm sure it benefit.
Is Intel, and that's obviously something that eventually they're going to renew.
Yeah, or it could be Microsoft who has a deal with Intel.
Yeah,
it could also be that.
Microsoft basically use their processors, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of loyalty for Intel. Even though they don't have the performance leadership, they've still got that history and that legacy with Windows. So it's still the main choice.
Every, that contract every 4 years that's coming in, it's just stream of revenue that's just going to keep happening, rather than Apple, where it's just based on one person. It's not a turnover.
Yeah, and the other thing with AMD though, that Intel is not competing with them. They're competing with NVIDIA for this, but they're also a graphics chip maker. Not really a maker, they design them and then TSMC makes them. But they're making graphics cards. They have been for a long time after they acquired ATI back in the day. And they're also making all the graphics chips and the CPUs for the PlayStations and Xboxes. Yeah,
that's big contracts.
That's big, yeah. No one else like NVIDIA is not making any game consoles. They've got complete monopoly over them. So
I was going to say NVIDIA mainly do PC GPUs, don't they?
PC, and I think AI.
The main customer.
Yeah, and also server. They're very big on server because they use their graphics chips. They have specialized one for either like compute workloads or graphics design, that kind of stuff. Yeah. They have specialized cards that are very, very expensive, like too expensive. We're talking like $8,000 to $10,000 for a card.
Yeah. I'll tell you, it'll be interesting to see how all that does when obviously you got TSM who are combining everything into one. Like obviously NVIDIA often sell things to gamers and things like that to upgrade, but when it gets to the point where everyone's using M1 chip sort of architecture, how well they'll do, because you can't just swap it out.
Yeah.
So
I think, well, it'll be dangerous if they, I think if if Apple set this precedent now of having everything on the one chip, I think it might spring this like proprietary war of like, we have this chip and we've got this special AI chip and everyone's got their own chip, and it's going to be a mess for the next 5 years until they all converge and go, okay, this is ridiculous. Can we just agree on a standard and move with that? But that's future world problems.
Yeah. Who knows whether it actually happened, to be fair, whether they'll just go, actually, we'll just produce these cheaper ones. Because, I mean, must admit, I'd have never, ever, Apple go, oh, yeah, we got this new M1 chip. Like, if you weren't looking into it now and the stock side of it, I wouldn't ever bother to look at it. I just go, oh, great, they've got a new chip. Oh, it's quicker. Shock.
Yeah.
That's all you'd look at.
Yeah, but it's also a completely different architecture. So Intel and AMD
I wouldn't
x86.
look at that. Yeah, but who looks at that?
That's your side, George. That's your industry. For me,
but for example,
Morgan goes, oh, you can get it in rose gold. I'll get that one.
Okay, I have an example, and this is just, I know this is from like, let's say a video editor's perspective, but it's something. Let's say you make a home movie, I don't know, something like that, or you're editing a photo.
Dangerous.
Who knows? Yeah, dangerous. Not that kind. So let's say you're working with photo or video. If you're using an M1 chip, which you paid, I don't know, let's say £1,000, you paid 1,000 for it, and you put it against a PC that you paid 6,000 to build, the M1 is faster. Like, it will be sometimes in the multitude of times, like 1 to 2 times faster at working with that video, and much more capable and much smoother. And it does not, like, if you're working with that or you're doing any type of professional work, it literally makes no sense to spend that money.
The GPU of the M1 would be quicker than the GPU of a custom built PC. It's
not the GPU, but it's the fact that they have on-chip accelerators for video, for, it gets different formats and stuff, and they can work with these types of workloads like AI workloads or video, any type of processing, and it's just a lot faster than with Intel.
It's just money.
But surely, if you were to build,
even a web browsing test, it was better at web browsing than any Intel computer.
See, I just think if you were to build a computer and you went full scale nerd and you put in or like NVIDIA big GPU, and things like that, surely, because you don't have restrictions on size when you're building a PC. Like, obviously to a certain extent you do, but not to the scale of a laptop. Surely that must be quicker at processing. You can have bigger process. You can have more cores.
Yeah, surely, but that's what's causing all the buzz, is the fact that they have a chip that's in an iPad and a MacBook Air that is killing $6,000 computers.
Yeah.
And then people are like, what is Apple's $6,000 computer going to do then? Because these are the cheap ones. What are the expensive ones going to be able to do? And they're worried that this might be like the end of traditional chips, because they've put so many little accelerators and special like proprietary things in it that now it's like so fast at all these things, but no one really knows how. It just kind of is.
I suppose it's faster, but say if you were to load up something which is particularly intense on a GPU, if you had a separate GPU, it'd be better because obviously it's quicker because it's all in one chip. But in terms of actual sort of processing power, it would be a lot more in a PC.
Well, for example, there's a benchmark called Cinebench, which kind of benchmarks, I guess, your computer's ability to do 3D rendering and that kind of workload, I guess, graphics related. And it tests the CPU and the GPU. And the MacBook Pro 13-inch with the M1 chip scored, I think it looks like about 80% of the way or 90% of the way to an 8-core Ryzen 9 with an RTX 2060 Max-Q. So, but this is the thing, we're comparing it, like when you look at these benchmarks, we're comparing it to things that are like 4 times the price.
Yeah.
So when they match that price, what are they gonna?
Yeah.
Following on
Fair
from
play.
what you said, George, obviously we're talking about going long with Apple, but do you reckon there might be a short play with like Intel? Because if they can't create the same chip or whatever, surely they're going to lose sales.
Yeah, well, Intel make their own chips, and what they're doing now is they're starting to realize they're not going to be able to compete with Apple, and they just lost Apple as a customer. So they've actually been begging Apple for them to be able to, like, Intel wants to make M1 chips, and Apple's like, nah.
So you could possibly have a look at shorting Intel.
Yeah, I think it would be an interesting one, just because
that would be a ballsy play, I think, to short Intel.
Well, I don't know, because if you think of it this way, if Apple releases this new chip, let's say an M2 or an M2X, whatever's coming, and it goes into a Mac Pro or something like that, and it completely obliterates everything from Intel and AMD, both of those stocks are going to sink quite significantly.
Like a short-term short play, and then obviously you take your money out, and then they come up with some new technology.
It would maybe be like in the lead up to a release of like a big Mac. It wouldn't be like, you wouldn't do it for like, I don't know, maybe the next laptops that are coming, but if they're doing a desktop of some kind, I would see,
I'm more thinking of cost, just because, like I said, obviously you could buy an Intel laptop for 500 quid or 400 quid, to be fair.
Yeah.
When you've got an M1 chip, which alone might cost £1,000, and then you've got the rest of the laptop, which is probably like, I don't know, say they retail for 1,500, or they'll probably be like £2,000 or something when they come out.
Like, well, the MacBook Air with the M1, right now I can get it for like €800. Sorry, 800 euros.
I think they're pretty reasonably priced. They're obviously higher end and they are more expensive. Obviously, Dan was saying with Intel, but they're not extortionate.
Not at the moment, no. Since they put it in the...
as well, and what they brought out, I don't think they're a lot of money.
They haven't put the expensive ones out yet. All the ones that are using the M1 chip are actually the cheap. Like, you can get a Mac Mini for like, I saw it for 700 euros or something. And that's like, it's like this big, and it is just as powerful as this huge computer below me. It's just like, why am I doing this? Like I mean, I totally understand, because I am a PC builder and I have that mentality, and I want it to be the case sometimes, but because it doesn't make sense in my head. I'm like, how can this huge thing with this gigantic fan and this huge GPU not be as good as an M1? But it's just not. Yeah. And I hate it, but it's not. And I hope they come out with something, because they're going to have to eventually, but it's going to spark some competition. Yeah. Just neither AMD or Intel really have anything in the pipeline that's going to compete with this at all.
No.
So it's hard.
Well, I think that's pretty much summarized our thing of Intel's going to shit. Apple are going to dominate everything again.
TSMC is going to be at the center of it all.
Yeah.
But
don't invest in them, because the margins are so small.
Great. Basically.
So cheers for watching.